start by saying hi, Tim?
Hey, Dale. How are you? It's nice to see you.
Nice to see you. It's been, 30 years or something.
It's been a long time.
You look exactly the same and you sound exactly the same.
I love the fact that you have boxes piled to the ceiling. That's so you.
I didn't know there was a co-op before I got to UCLA. I didn't know what a student co-op was, but I knew what a co-op was. So I knew I was going to seek it out as soon as I got there. So I don't know how I knew that.
And Tim?
Yeah, so I started at UCLA in the fall of 1983, and I was carpooling with my high school friend, Heather Himes. And Heather Himes got sick of driving from Northridge in the San Fernando Valley, and she found this co-op. And so I lost my ride, and I took the bus to UCLA for the first quarter. And then because of her, I came over and checked it out. And the rest is, that's how I found out about it. It turned out that, I don't think if I hadn't had the personal contact, I would have ever found it, because it really wasn't in the mainstream. No one was promoting it. I started out and I lived in a scene in a triple, and which was really exciting. I had a great time. And, I was just a regular grunt, probably worked in the kitchen to start out with, and didn't think much about that. But I have a really annoying habit of joining things and getting, involved. And so I think, I can recall running for MEMCOM and being on MEMCOM. And I can recall running for the board and being on the board. And I can recall being the Chatterbox editor. And I did the renovation thing, which was a big, big thing. But I also remember making, at the end of my tenure there, kind of regrouping into being the yogurt maker, being a bread maker. And these are just fuzzy memories, because it's kind of amazing that we even made yogurt or bread. And then I did this. Also, I was a Saturday cook. I remember that. I was a Saturday cook, and I got paid, or a weekend cook. I got paid to do that. And using all that equipment, and the fellow who, Lori, and what was that? Bob was amazing. Yeah, Bob Fair. There wasn't much in the way of training, and this is all really dangerous stuff. But so I think I kind of ran the gamut on those kinds of things. But it was always something interesting to do there.
Well, I am sure that I started out in the kitchen. I think it might have even been a requirement that you had to start at least.
That's right. It was a requirement. That's right.
Yeah. So, which was fine. I think half or a third of the co-op worked in the kitchen at any given moment anyway. So it was fine. And then I have no idea how I ended up changing jobs. I have this vague recollection that Marcus Young Owl recruited me into the mailroom. And then we worked together for a long time there. And then the longer you're at the co-op, the more involved in stuff you get, and the more ideas you have, and the more you want to do. So I wandered around different jobs. Eventually, I ended up working in the office. How did I do that? Because I didn't work in there as the assistant GM until after I graduated. That was 1985. But I remember being in there before then, and I remember getting on the board, and the objective on the board was I wanted to clean up our rule book. It was, I don't know if you remember the hallway that went back to the kitchen. That was where we kept all the board minutes and stuff like that. And it was just a disorganized mess, and there were all these archaic rules in there that made no sense. So I wanted to get on the board and say, let's get rid of this stupid rule, or let's change this, or something like that. So I did that for a quarter, hence all the binding of the chatterboxes, and I went through every storage room in the closet. Everything was all tidy and organized by the time I left. Being voted in the board by this huge landslide, but that was because all the Chinese students knew my name from working in the office.
Yeah, well, it helps. Name recognition counts.
It was name recognition, yeah. And then I was going to go to New York for the summer. Tim, you might even remember that, because I met you in Washington, D.C. on that trip with Brian Lawson and Simon.
Right.
Yeah. And right before I left, Dennis said, could you be the assistant general manager? And I said, well, but I'm leaving for New York. And he said, we'll hold it till you come back if you say yes. So I was actually going to move up to the Berkeley area with another gal that I met from the Ann Arbor Co-op. We were going to meet in San Francisco and be roommates. And I had to call her, this was so last minute, and say, hey, I'm not going to move to San Francisco after all. I'm going to come back and stay and work at the co-op. Que sera. So that was a huge path not taken.
And when was the last year that you were there, Gail?
So 1985, I'm now an employee. I'm no longer a student there. And during that time, I sometimes lived at the co-op and sometimes didn't live in the co-op. I moved to Hollywood for a while after the D-Wing fire. The D-Wing fire happened because of my poor choice of a boyfriend at the time. And after the fire, I said, all right, we're moving out. And so we moved to Hollywood and I commuted. And then that poor choice eventually got realized. I left him, moved back into the co-op.
Good.
And then I was there until I went to Africa in late '89, and then Sherry took my place. And it was meant to be temporary. She knew I was coming back. So then I came back, and I don't remember, I was there in 1990, and then I moved out because John Aguilar died.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
And Greg was his roommate, and
That's right.
Greg called me and told me about John. And I knew Greg, he was always going to be tight for rent. So suddenly not having a roommate like that, I knew was going to be a problem for him. So I said, would you like me to move in temporarily? And he said, sure. And then I ended up staying in that apartment in Santa Monica for a while. And then right after that, after I moved to Santa Monica, I don't remember what happened at the co-op. Some weird stuff was happening. Kerry wasn't anywhere near as fun as Dennis was.
No.
And I'd been there for a long time at that point, so I just kind of moved on after that.
So both of us kind of fade away there. I think I was telling them before you came on, or maybe while you were here, that I think I faded away from there in the late summer of 1991. So that sort of sounds about the same time.
Thankfully, it was before the renovation. And it was, like I said, it was a poor choice of a boyfriend who had left something burning in his room when he went to go take a shower, came back out, and his room, D21, was on fire. And I think I posted some pictures of of them shoveling out the room. The stuff was getting shoveled out the D21 window to the backyard when the fire was put out. When I started, computers did not exist. Everything was done with a typewriter. I remember when we first got a computer in the office, so we're all like trying to figure out how to make this thing work, and we went through iterations of trying to figure out how to make computers, make co-op more efficient. Right. So, and I remember when, Eric Lowenbach, Tim? Sure. He got the first Mac. And I'm like, oh, this is so cool. Why do we have this stupid PC in the office? This thing is so much cooler. So
I do remember, it's funny, I'll just interject. I remember because I must have been like, I had key privileges for the office. And I must have been working on something, because we did have one, like, I mean, if you look up in Wikipedia, it was basically like an IBM XT clone, right? So this was like, 1985, and it had WordStar on it, which was this crazy program that basically was like a terminal program, and to be able to do any of the formatting you want, you had to learn all these obscure keyboard combinations to get it bold. And it wasn't like Control B, it would be like Control F5 or something. It was completely asinine because it was basically from probably the 1970s when they ran it on mainframes. So it was very funny, but I remember being very jazzed that I could go in there at night and use this thing, like probably for my papers.
Yeah.
That's probably what I did, because it was very unusual to have a computer around.
Yes.
It just wasn't in the air. But yeah, when Lowenbach got his Mac, that was a couple years, 86, 87, that was a big deal. So I was kind of interested in history and urban planning. I really loved living in that building and the Richard Neutra design of it and everything. It had a really physiological effect on me. I felt very at peace being in that building. So I kind of felt like it would be a good thing to try to do something positive. I also thought about personally, I'm just kind of sharing my personal thoughts, that it was like something I wanted to do. That was the kind of work I wanted to ultimately do. So I don't know what I was called. I was probably the renovation coordinator or something like that. So I was very involved in that. And it went pretty well. I think that actually it kind of got off of its rails a little bit towards the end because, you know, John Mosier, who was the maintenance guy, who was just a pain in the ass, kind of old, you know, like Harley Davidson. The first time I ever heard of that big Harley Davidson rally in Wyoming, what's it called? You know, that he was telling me about that. And so it's like, you know, and he did some things which were just the most outrageous things ever. One day, he decided that rather than following the landscape plan for the backyard, he was going to pour concrete over the entirety of the backyard of Rose. So all the area, you know, south of the building, I came home one day and it was completely covered with concrete.
Wow.
And I just completely lost it with him because actually I had gone and in the morning I typically would do a walkthrough the day before. So I went by the day before and saw, what the hell's all this rebar doing and all this form work, right? I knew that this was not right. This is supposed to be grass. So I went down to him and said, what are you doing? And he says, well, we have real drainage problems there. I think it's best that we put concrete in the whole backyard. And I said, John, don't you dare do that. That's not what we intended to do. Don't do that. And he just went and did it. And in fact, you know, had I been a little more knowledgeable, we should have just fired his ass. Because that's basically insubordination. And it cost us, I'm sure, probably 20 grand because they had to go out there and saw cut out all the concrete that was in the wrong place so we could have, you know, what is basically the lawn and walkway areas, right? It's just stupid.
He looked intimidating. He would sit in the garage, you know, across the street from, you know, in the garage in Robeson. Does Robeson still have the garages?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So one of those garages was the maintenance garage, and he would leave that garage open and sit up on the workbench like a troll. He looked like a troll. He acted like a troll. He loved being a troll.
The attention.
He would say nasty things to people, and we're like, you know, John, you really got to tone it down. You can't, you know. And it took me a long time to, one, get over being afraid of John, and two, eventually I grew to like John.
He was a nice guy. I actually enjoyed, you know, bullshitting with him. I mean, I wasn't frightened of him either, but yeah, he was definitely a character.
Well, I was frightened of him at first. Took a while,
Yes.
Took a while, but eventually.